When we moved to the farm, there was a pair of geese on the lake. We had moved to our farm with a very particular kind of quiet inside of us. Our family had 4 children, and one of them was no longer with us. And I was, at that point in my life, someone who had learned to watch. The kind of attention that arrives when our consciousness has been widened, often by suffering, that we did not choose. This particular goose had tucked her nest into the reeds along a bank, and I watched her from a distance for weeks. Then one morning, there were 4 goslings. I watched her teach them to swim, to forage, to stay close. I was also aware of the shoreline, the shapes of predators, the fox that would appear in the morning, the shadows of eagles that were crossing the water. This was not intended to intervene or protect, just to watch. And yet the watching itself felt like a participation. Then one morning, there were 3. I knew before I counted because I felt the shift in the field, and it was not my grief projected outward. It was something older than that, something that moved through both of us. She kept teaching her offspring. She kept guiding. She did not, as far as I could observe, stop trusting the lake out of fear. And what became clear to me, watching her over the weeks that followed, was that the crossing I was standing at was not, in the end, about her. A working assumption that has dominated the modern study of the mind for about 4 centuries is that consciousness is produced by the brain, that our awareness is an emergent property of a sufficiently complex biological machinery. Now, there's always been a problem with this assumption. We call it the hard problem of consciousness, because no amount of physical descriptions of your mind, your brain, neurons firing, chemicals flowing, circuits integrating, explains why any of it is accompanied by having an experience, a human experience at all. So more and more, we have serious philosophers and scientists who are returning to an older ancient idea, that consciousness is not produced. It is fundamental, a base feature of the universe, present through reality in varying forms, rather than an unexplained product of certain arrangements of matter, of us. So under this view, the goose was not a simpler consciousness being observed by a more complex one, by me. She was consciousness arriving in form. I was consciousness arriving in mine. Then there were the reeds, the water, the shadow patterns across the lake. All are participating in a consciousness that was not produced by any one of us. It was the substrate from which all of us were arising. So what guards the space between ordinary awareness and this wider participation is not a lack of human capacity. What guards it is fear of a specific kind. Not fear as the opposite of clarity, fear as what arises because of clarity. The moment our human system registers the cost of what we will know, it hesitates. Our analytical mind responds by accelerating construction, offering explanations, assembling options, by converting that felt lived experience of participation back into a manageable, objective study. But thank goodness our bodies respond differently. It goes quiet. It registers without language that something real is present, and awareness itself always arrives at an edge. The invitation is to let your attention remain open to the participation that has already been there. And here's how you do so. Crossing is not passive. It is a specific movement, that willingness to release the mind's grip on the idea that it is the author of awareness, and rather that awareness is something that all are arising from within. What I received from the goose was not information. It was not empathy. It was not a projection or a sentiment. It was not a therapeutic breakthrough. It was something older and wiser. The direct recognition of a consciousness we were both arising within. She did not have to call it a field. She had no need to do so. She was not separate from it. My own crossing over those weeks of watching was the slow recognition that I had never been separate from an either. I was only trained to experience myself as though I were. This is what I have come to call the gift of the field. The moments when another being, human or otherwise, reveals simply by its own uncomplicated participation that the consciousness we are arising within is shared. This is not a metaphor, it's structural. The goose was doing what geese do. The lake was doing what lakes do. And the field that held all of us in that moment was doing what consciousness does when it is allowed to be recognized, offering itself across forms to whoever, whatever, is willing to receive. You already have your version of the lake. Whatever brought you to this edge, the fear that arises precisely because something is about to become recognized, that fear is not a sign to turn back. It is the evidence that you are at a crossing. What changes at the edge of a crossing is not the field. The field's always been here. What changes is your willingness to cross and to recognize that you were never separate from whatever you are crossing toward. You already know. The work is simply walking through.